we're going to look at what makes it different between a residential lease and a student lease. The importance of surety. I think that is quite an important thing. I'm not going to touch on NSFAS students. They are the experts on those type of things. So I'm not going to speak to that. So if you guys have got questions about them, please speak to Retha. And then I'm just going to touch on important clauses on a lease agreement. Again, remember, I'm coming from the legal side, and we're going to touch on a couple of practical things. I loved what Retha said about law students. Absolutely correct. Just to say, in the past year, I had to evict 2 attorneys, and it was absolutely tedious. The one attorney stopped paying his rent because the birds were making a noise on his stoop. It's absolutely ridiculous. And then we're just going to touch on eviction quickly. And, you know, if it plays a big role and whatnot. So that is what we're going to touch on. It's going to be a very light session because I think, luckily, the things that's really tedious on students on the contracts and the legal side is not really things that's usually very dominant, like in a residential part. Of course, if we enter into a residential lease, I'm going to touch on that because this is like a summary on things that we touched on the last occasion. This is somebody that moves into a property and it's its primary residence. So, I mean, they don't want to really move again and, you know, all of that type of thing. So that's the first thing that really plays a role. The second thing, residential leases is managed by the PI Act. And remember, whether it's now month to month or fixed term, the PI Act will be applicable because it's the primary residence. And ideally, your lessee should also be the occupant. Now, just to recap on that, remember you have a lessee in an agreement and you have an occupant on an agreement. Your occupant doesn't necessarily have to be a lessee. Okay, and I'm going to go into that a bit more detail when I address the student accommodation now as well, that will divide it and make it very easy to understand. And of course, if we do vetting for affordability, I mean, with residential, affordability is a very important thing. I mean, you don't want somebody to move into a property to stay there as their primary residence, and then they cannot afford to stay there. Now, Retha also, with her absolute amazing experience, has touched on, you know, what she looks at when she vets students. And I think that's a total different aspect. So I'm not going to touch on it too much, again, just from the legal side. Now, student accommodation. Now, I have to say, summer coming in, I do miss my student days, being lazy in the sun, on the grass, most probably drinking cheap wine. And, you know, it's a total different era and people that you're looking at. And of course, it's a phase that's going to move on. So student accommodation is definitely not their primary residence. If you kick them out now, they can go back to their parents, their aunt, their family, or wherever their primary residence is. They've got a room somewhere else. And that is one of the things that makes it so differently. Your approach on a student accommodation is like a business. It's not like residential lease agreements where you are leasing out a place to stay. So that's one of the things that one makes it easy. And of course, what makes it nice about that is the PI Act is not applicable, because the PI Act is only applicable if it's primary residence. That's why the PI Act is not applicable to Airbnb, holiday accommodation, and of course student accommodation. So keep that in mind. Now you say to me, okay, Lise, if the student doesn't want to move, now overall, usually students do maybe have a 4-year course and they do it in 6 years. But most of the times, you know, they are going to move on, even if it's taking a bit longer than you want to. But it's going to be a process of a normal, I want my property back. And because they've got possession and you purely want possession back. It's a much shorter application that you're going to bring. Although, and I would like Retha's input on this a bit later as well, is the fact that the biggest problem usually with students and student accommodation is not the fact that they don't want to move out, is the fact that you don't want payment. It's much easier to stay and then you struggle to get payment out of them than to get them out of the property. Where with residential lease, remember, many times they don't have anywhere to move to. Now, I saw the question popping up as to what is the PIVA Act. You see in the slide is the description. We touched on this on the last occasion, and it's really the act that deals with illegal occupants and how to evict an illegal occupant. Now, the one thing about this is now I can't see everybody's faces. And if I'm talking too fast, please somebody slows me down, okay? I don't want to run and lose you guys somewhere along the line. So if I need to slow down, please stop me or raise a hand and I'll answer questions. Okay, so one of the things that I'm really, and I want you guys to grasp this, is the lessee might not be the occupant. So let's think about it. A student wants to lease your property because he wants student accommodation. And now they want to go and stay in there. Now, it doesn't help us if the student just signs the lease agreement. And the reason why I'm saying that is, firstly, students don't have money. So the financial aspects of that, they won't be able to make the monthly installments. So you want the parents, whether it's one or two, ideally both, depending on the scenario. But I always say the more that signs, the better, because you can chase more people to make payment. The reason why you might want the student to sign the lease agreement is the psychological aspect of it. That you can tell the student that he signed the agreement and therefore he must know the rules. Now, remember, even if he doesn't sign the lease agreement, he's automatically bound to the house rules and all the terms of the lease agreement because he gets his occupation through this lease agreement. But just for him to say, okay, now you're now in the big world, you're now becoming a grown-up, you must sign all the terms as well, there's no harm in it. But from a financial aspect, it's definitely better for the parents or the people that's going to pay the bills to sign the agreements. Everybody happy with that? Oh, thank you, Retha.
We have a question over here, Elise. We're just going to quickly get that question in.
Hi. What happens when the student is paid by NSFAS? Do we request the university to sign the lease agreement?
Okay, so I'll answer that one. So how that works is that the bursary is and the agreement for that is between the university and the student. So your lease agreement with an NSFAS student, the student must sign. If they don't sign, they won't pay. The university won't pay. University doesn't have to sign, but the student must sign, and you must sign as well. That's for NSFAS students. I still like to, but sometimes it gets a bit tricky. They get clever and they don't want to give you their parents' details, but it's also good to get the parents to also sign, because if for some reason their bursaries gets withdrawn halfway through the year, who's going to pay now? Then it's the parent that must pay. So it's good. For NSFAS students, the student has to sign, and then also get the parent to sign. But in those situations, because those are kids from very disadvantaged backgrounds, the parents probably can't afford it. So you are taking a little bit of a risk. And if you see that they can't afford it, better to get them then to move out. If their bursary was withdrawn, get them to rather move out sign an acknowledgement of debt and let them slowly pay it off, something that they can afford. That's about your best bet.
How do you become aware if the bursary has been withdrawn, or you must keep on checking with the university or college?
You have to keep checking. But they will so what happened with us last year is that so they go through an approval process. Beginning of the year, you submit forms, private accommodation application forms that they have to sign. You as the landlord sign in a little big pack of documents like this that you hand in. Then what happens is that they will get either approved or not. Now, it's good to understand the requirements on that form, that if they stay within a certain kilometer radius from the university, if their home address is within 50 kilometers of the university, they're not going to get approved for private accommodation. Okay? So it's very important to check what is their home addresses. Now, sometimes they'll give you a home address, but the address they've given the university is different. So in that case, there will be a query, there will be delays, but there's nothing you can really do about it because you can't see what they submitted on their NSFAS forms. So in that situation, I hope I answered that. Sorry,
Happy.
Stopping in the middle.
Yeah.
Cool.
If the student bursaries has been cancelled, how long does it take maybe for you to know? And if the student maybe will start banking classes, is NSFAS checking throughout the year to say they are no longer attending, hence they won't pay, or do you get some notification prior?
Okay, so let me talk, because I forgot to answer the actual part of your question. So they will, when they get approved, okay, for private accommodation, the university will send a notification to the student, you have been accepted for the first semester, okay, for private accommodation. They are supposed to also copy you. Last year and this year, for some reason, they get your email address wrong. I think we write Ubuntu. Where's Ubuntu? Her handwriting is too ugly. So then they get the email wrong and you don't get those notifications. So we follow up with the student and the university. Did they get accepted? Did they get accepted? Some of them, we're still waiting. They're saying they are waiting to hear back from NSFAS.
I wanted to check on that student behavior for vetting. How do you check the behavior if someone is coming in for the first time? First year student or second year student but coming in for the first time?
I mean, with rental, it's easier. You don't pay your rent out, or you have to catch up. With behavior, it's slightly, we handle it slightly differently, but there's a whole section just on discipline.
Awesome. So it's amazing and it's really interesting, the questions, and that's why I think every aspect, everything is so intertwined. So if we quickly go look at the surety, and just to say, remember, if you need your student to move out, you can really tell them, pack your bags and leave. I mean, either they can leave now or they should be out tomorrow. It's nothing like give them 7 days or a month or anything to that effect. Depending, of course, what your lease agreement stipulates on that notices as well. But I mean, for non-payment, you have no obligation to keep them on there. So let's quickly go look at the sureties. And Retha said something very, very relevant. If somebody is on a bursary, there's a very good chance that their parents don't have any income of substance. So to really push that and say, listen, I'm not going to take students, for example, if their parents don't sign the lease agreements or don't sign the surety. I think you should really look at it in context. That's where law and business sort of comes together. Always make sure that, if you go and you let somebody sign, make sure that that person will have funds, that you'll be able to recover that funds. whether it's not always immediately, but in the future. Remember, you have your claim is valid for 3 years. So you can at least bound them and say, you know, you are liable for this. The other thing that I'm thinking of, and just from my history, my parents made sure that I study and pass my subjects because they want me to keep my bursary because they knew that they won't be able to pay everything. So they didn't want that financial burden. So they also helped keep me in check and make sure that I do everything that I need to do to keep my bursaries. So also look who's the person of authority over the student. And that's sort of where I came back to say that, you know, the person that can tell them if somebody signs because they just have money, but they don't have any influence over the student, you know, always get the influencer also over the student. So I think that's why if there's a mom and a dad, aunt and an uncle, somebody is the enforcer and somebody's got the funds. So that's just out of something that I've seen that sort of makes sense when you look at surety. So it's not just somebody that can pay, but it's also somebody that has that authority to can help to keep the student in check. We're going to jump now to important clauses from my side. Now, oops, let's just go back there quickly. I just wanted to move your faces so I can see the top one. Overall, in any agreement, remember your house and body rules don't have to be incorporated in your lease agreement if you don't want to make it too bulky. Even if you want to have it separate and you want to let them sign it separately, but always attach it to your lease agreement, that it's a full document, okay? Because if it's not part of your lease agreement, and you say that, listen, you are contravening these rules, I'm going to cancel the lease agreement, and it wasn't attached, it makes it difficult. So always make sure that it's set up in a way also that's understandable. I usually say, you know, lawyers do have a tendency of making things so difficult because they charge per page. So it must seem if you're getting value for your money. But with rules and house rules, be clear. You know, say to them that don't make noise late at night. Now, my late at night and a student's late at night is definitely not the same type of late at night. So make sure and say no heavy noise after 10, for example. Be clear on the rules. You know, define it as much as possible from a legal aspect. I don't know if Retha will agree with me, but that everybody can be on the same page, that there can be no uncertainty. And I think that is almost something that is super vital from my side. Because other people, you know, they will say, oh, I didn't know. And they'll keep on pushing it as well, because students are like toddlers, you know, they see how much they can get away with. The other thing is to be sure on the rules, because students will be sharing and the consequences thereof. So they must know that they should keep each other accountable as well. You can't expect, say, for example, the rule is always keep the doors locked. And now the guys go out, they come back, and somebody didn't lock the door. Now things are stolen. They have to know that that cannot be now the job of the landlord to have somebody at the door and making sure the door gets locked every time. They need to know that they are accountable towards each other as well, and that they have to make sure that they get everything done. If you, your food, for example, mark it clearly. It doesn't help if you say, but everybody's drinking my milk, but everybody agreed that they'll buy Clover milk, and you buy Clover milk, they will think it's the house stuff and that they're sharing. So tell them basic things to make their lives easier. Notice and letters. Over and above that, it is usually in the agreement stipulated where the notices would come. Make sure that you also give a copy to the student. It doesn't help just to send a letter to the person that's nominated in the lease agreement to say that the student is making noise. Many people don't care, okay? It's like, oh, at least he's having a good time. I'm not going to bug him with this now. You know, you want to give that to the student as well. So I would definitely suggest, over and above that, it gets emailed to the lessees on the lease agreement, that it also been given to the occupant, that they have it on hand. I mean, if it's somebody that's continuously giving problems, if they've got a door that they lock, if they go out, maybe stick it against the door and everybody can see that this guy is in trouble because he's making too much noise. The other thing that I think is absolutely important is to make sure that it's detailed as to what you get when you stay here. That you know it's the rent. Maybe that you know you don't get somebody that comes in and they expect the washing to be done, you know, dishes and everything. They think it's a hotel, you know. That they be clear that, listen, the rent only includes this. If you want somebody that has to come and clean, it will be an additional amount once a week, and this is what you get. That you always, that people know exactly what is set out. If it's, is the Wi-Fi included? Is it excluded? The DSTV, is it included? Is it excluded? If the Wi-Fi is included, is it uncapped? Or do each student get 5 gigs? And so the gamer guy, you know, you have to top up your own account, something like that. That's small things that really, it sounds very obvious, but that's how most disputes happen, is because people think it's obvious at this stage, but then later on they realize it's not that obvious. I always love this story. There was a car accident, and the guy came around the corner, he lost control, and he drove into the tree. Now you had 2 witnesses. The one was a Formula 1 car driver, and the other one was an 80-year-old lady. And you asked the 80-year-old lady, how was the guy driving? And she said, oh, this guy was speeding. Listen, I haven't seen a car that drive that fast in my life. He came so fast, I saw like smoke behind him and he ran into the wall. They go to the Formula 1 guy and they said, okay, what happened? He said, oh no, man, this guy came very slowly around the bend. I think there should have been something on the street. He lost control and he ran into the tree. Because according to him, what is fast and what is to the old lady is fast is not the same thing. Same thing in life. So make sure that everything is really clear onto, I mean, I would think maybe 5 gigs of data is a lot. Maybe if you ask my kids, or if you ask a student if 5 gigs is a lot, they won't agree. So put it in that everybody is on the same page. Happiness. Any questions?
We do
Can you hear
have
me?
some.
Elise, can you hear me?
Yes, I
Just give me
can.
a thumbs up. Okay, cool. So there are a few questions online that we're going to start with. So I'm going to head over to Seth, and then we will just read those out to you, and we can start with those.
So the first question is from Ramkoni. She's asking, can you claim the losses from the student when they're working?
Can you, I just want to confirm I heard the question correctly. Can you recover the losses when they're working? Okay, so remember, your claim is valid for 3 years. So, and that is if you didn't get judgment. If there's an amount due and owing, and the student is a lessee on the lease agreement, and there's money due, you can definitely, you know, start the process within 3 years, or proceed to get judgment against them. Remember, that's a very valid thing that people, many in the future, they will want to start their work and their employment as on a clean slate. So it will force them to enter into an agreement to pay off those amounts, because nobody would like somebody to start work if they already got a judgment in place. But yes, remember, before judgment, you've got 3 years to claim your money. After judgment, you've got 30. Next question.
Any questions on the floor? Yes.
To what extent can you align the lease agreement with the rules of the university where they have residential? Do they maybe force you to align the two, or you can do as you want?
You can do what you want because it's private accommodation, so you can have your own specific rules. But I do like to try and keep it as close as possible to that. So then, when they come and they do nonsense, and you can put a complaint in at the university, then they understand those rules already because they have similar rules, which is very nice. Before Elise moves on to the whole eviction part, I need to tell you guys this. No matter how nice and clear your lease agreement is, it means nothing because they don't read it. Okay? They don't. Don't assume that they read lease agreements. Don't assume that they read rules. They don't. Never. I don't think once I had a student. They sat down, 3 of them, on the little step, and they read through the lease. And in the lease, my lease that I was using at the time, it said there, electricity, clause 11. I know that clause very well. It says, the tenant is responsible for all electricity, for all water, for all sewage, like a normal tenant. And they were like, but you said electricity is included. And only then I was like, oh yeah, no, you're correct. And I scratched it out. None of the other students looked at it. Nobody ever, and I'm still using that same contract. They never come back to me about that. Why? Because they don't read it. And I think that that is a very, very important thing, that they're so excited just to have a place to stay that they'll sign anything. Okay? So be ethical, but know that they will sign anything. So make sure that you have the right clauses in there for them to sign, because you can hold them accountable to that later on. But you don't want to get to be in a position where they didn't read a clause, they now contravened it, and now there's consequences. You don't want to get into that situation in the first place, because then it's almost too late. And now it's a fight and it's a horrible situation. And these are young kids. They like to rally around their friend that has now been hard done by. And now you have a big problem, because now they're teaming up against you. So the best thing is to take that lease when everybody's moved in. Your first house meeting, hello, harara, we're all happy, we're here, meet your friends. The second one, sit down. Where's your documents? Yeah, we're going to go through it line by line. What does this mean, this word prohibit? What does it mean? You read paragraph 1. What does it say? And then you sit and they read it. What does that mean? And you take it like that, line by line by line. It takes 3-4 hours, whatever it may be, it's fine. But after that, they know the rules. And what also helps is that these notices, things that we get a lot, don't put your clothing unattended. Don't leave it unattended. They leave it unattended, it goes missing, and it's my fault. No. You put notices up wherever you can. Don't leave your clothing unattended. You're like, come, can you see? I even put a notice. You've been through the meeting where we went through the rules line by line. And I want to touch quickly on a few things that is definitely needs to be in your lease agreement that we found. I think the main one is around insurance. The cell phone goes missing in the house, not my problem. There's a break-in the house, still doesn't matter, because you need insurance on your valuables. Okay? There's no insurance company, and we've been through a lot, that will insure your tenants' belongings. And even if they will, the amount of money it's going to cost you to do that, you don't know. This kid lying about the cell phone, tomorrow the cell phone goes missing, or missing because they need a new one or they want a new one. Was it really a situation? So stuff going missing, you cannot, unfortunately, put insurance on that. So I put it like in 10 different places, everywhere in the lease, and I make them sign next to each one of those places. Redundancy. And I said to Ubuntu, this new kid, they're checking in. They even have a separate page with all the important points that they sign again when they come in. So now they signed this thing 4 times. It still doesn't help, but at least you can say to them, guys, you agreed to this thing 4 times. So sorry, I'm sorry, but I cannot. You know. And we've had I think the most common thing that we get is clothing going missing. We've had it where the laundry area, they don't watch their stuff. There's other people in the area. Next thing you go back, your clothes all gone. One student left his stuff overnight in the washing machine. Next morning he gets there. Some person from the street managed to take the lock off. They came in, everything gone. Number 1, rule says no clothing in the washing, no clothing unattended. Rule number 2, no washing after 9 o'clock. You contravene both those rules. Clause number 3 in the lease, we will not be held responsible for stuff going missing. Clause number 4, insurance is your business.
I just want to add something there to Retha, is that you guys have to remember, and I think students should be made aware of it. These actions by them has an influence in the future. Now, many of your professions that they're entering into is based on ethics, trust. I mean, for example, law students, I had a candidate attorney, they were naughty and they went and they stole a stop street sign. And actually, because there was a hearing and a problem with that, they actually could have stopped him, prevented him from becoming an attorney because of that. So maybe use that. I'm not saying that everything is always going to be helpful, but use that definitely to say, like, listen, you have, your actions now has an impact on your future. Nobody is going to want to put you in a trust position if you're not trustworthy. Also, please keep proper records. Never go to someone and say, yo, you many times you contravene the rules. And you can't specify that on the 1st, on the 3rd, or the 8th. So keep proper records. Even if it's just a book, I mean, you don't have to give him a notice every time, but it doesn't help him contravening, and then you get hurtful by the 4th time, and now you sort of want to be very harsh on the student, and you know it's maybe not something that's gonna stand. So keep proper records of that. It's also good to keep for the future. So that was just my 5 cents on that. So we're going to quickly jump on to the eviction process. If you need to evict a student, like I said, I'm not going to stand still on this too long, because most of the time it's not a problem to get students out. Retha, have you guys ever had trouble getting somebody out that didn't want to leave? She's thinking about it, I can see.
But, you know, it was last year and so many things happened and it was such chaos that they were upset. They were angry, they were upset. And it was end of the year and they've just had enough. And we have messed them around so much during the year that I really can't blame them for being upset, okay? But then they decided that they're not leaving. And at first, I was like fighting against it because I'm like, no, you have to vacate, you have to vacate. And then I thought, okay, fine. You want to spend Christmas with me? By all means. We'll have Christmas together. And guess what? Those parents paid their bus tickets. You have to come home now. Where are you? I want you home for Christmas. They go home for Christmas. They don't have the key or the lock or the code to get into the property next year. There's somebody else sleeping in that bed already. They're not going to come back. So you're only really stuck with that person. Luckily, that was end of the year, right? So it was like a 2-week problem, and then they were all gone. And by the way, by that time, I wasn't paying any prepaid electricity anymore because they were supposed to be out, right? So they had to pay their own electricity as well while they were there. But they moved out. They didn't vandalize the place or anything in that time, although there were big threats of that. But they eventually left, and they didn't come back. So yeah, if that happens in the middle of the year, even then, your holiday times, June holidays, they'll go. Otherwise, you know, it's a lot of pressure having somebody knock on your door every day, like, so when are you leaving? You know, and it's not nice for those parents as well to have their kids there and not in a nice environment and so on. But yeah, I mean, I must say I've never really had issues. When we had kids that all of a sudden their bursaries were withdrawn and they couldn't continue, we had a nice discussion with them, and their parents made a plan for them to go stay with some family and friends and that sort of thing. So I've never, apart from the end of the year, I've never had a problem when it came to payments and things like that. They actually prefer to move out. When they hear that their bursaries isn't going to pay, then they're like, oh, I can't pay all of this, and they actually move out themselves.
Okay. So, I mean, and that is very valid. So that's why I'm not going to spend, it's a straightforward application. It should take about 6 weeks if you go that route. But like I said, I've very seldomly ever heard somebody that needs to take that process. The most thing usually that you have to focus on is the summons that has to be issued to claim your damages. And again, I think always keep this in mind when you want to litigate ever. Is it worth the cost? Remember, if you're going to start litigation, you're going to pay legal fees. You're not going to recoup all of your money. So always determine whether it's worthwhile. If, in my mind, anything less than 10,000 Rand is not even worth going to a lawyer to, in many instances, because you're going to at least pay 3,000 Rand. And there's a good chance that they won't even you get the money back, because if people don't have money, they don't have money. So that's that.